When we hear the words E.T. and Atari put together, people automatically think about the Atari 2600 version, buried over stock cartridges in the desert, and the near destruction of a hobby and industry that most of us are enjoying to this very day. And E.T. Atari 2600 has been documented, discussed, and defended to death on the internet, and especially here on YouTube. Personally, I don't think that game is nearly the worst one ever made, and most people who place it at the top of their worst games ever lists are typically trying to appease the masses, or probably never gave it a real go. But believe it or not, I'm not here to discuss that game. And there was another E.T. game on Atari platforms that seems to be wholly ignored by, well, everybody. E.T. Phones Home was a cartridge released on the Atari 8-bit computers back in May of 1983, and was published and developed by Atari themselves. So let's find out if this game shares the same gameplay and style of its 2600 cousin, or if it's an overshadowed gem that needs to be given some light of its own. E.T. Phone Home was released several months after the 2600 version that was likely rushed out for holiday sales. But it seems that Atari gave developers Steve Englehart and Dave Comstock some extra time to produce a better game for the Atari 8-bits, and they used this time wisely in my opinion. I doubt they would have wanted to port the universally panned 2600 version, but not because of how quote-unquote bad it was, but because the Atari 8-bit line of computers was so much more capable than its console counterpart. Well, I guess the 5200 is the Atari 8-bit's console counterpart, but I digress. Now, much like many of the Atari 400 and 800 games, the cartridge that this is housed in doesn't seem to be much to look at. And the cover art of the box features the iconic alien finger from the film, rather than the artwork of the 2600 version. Side note, I never liked the box art of the 2600 version. I don't know, it's just weird. Am I alone on this? But again, I digress. The game itself is different in design and gameplay from that version, even if the quest is kinda close to the other. Let me explain. In this 8-bit version, you play as Elliot instead of E.T., but you still get to see the titular extraterrestrial whenever you want by pressing the button while standing still. More on this later. You take Elliot and explore a wide-open playfield with a wide variety of locales, including a city, a forest, grasslands, and some bodies of water. You must stick to the paths as Elliot, and you're trying to put together a phone in order for your little buddy to call his family and hitch a ride back home. There are 9 difficulty levels, and I recommend playing on the lower few until you get the hang of the game. As Elliot, you need to collect somewhere between 4 to 9 pieces, depending on the difficulty setting. In the first few difficulty levels, you will come across only the correct pieces, but on higher levels, you're going to want to check with your alien friend, again by pressing the button while standing still, to make sure the items you're collecting are the right color. And this is where the challenge comes from. Finding the right item but wrong color means your quest continues, and it's easy to get caught up carrying the wrong item home if you aren't checking in with your alien friend. But his energy is constantly depleting, and every time you check in with him, it depletes much, much faster. Elliot is also being chased by police officers, military men, and scientists as well, and they actually act with some intelligence. Some will chase Elliot as expected, and they simply take his held item should they touch him and hide it elsewhere on the map. But some of these other guys will stay a bit away from Elliot and monitor his actions and only advance onto his location if he touches an item. And others yet will chase him but only stay a distance away, attempting to have him lead them to the items so that they can steal him and hide him elsewhere. It's really intelligent enemy AI for the time, and it requires you to make note of where everybody is and how they're behaving. Now, it can be a little frustrating when a ton of people are all over where you want to pick up an item, but you typically can lead them away and come back later. You can also hold the button while moving to make Elliot run, but only when he isn't holding an item. This can help to get some distance between your stalkers and to help get your items home, but you can't do so when holding the equipment. Hitting the button when holding something causes you to drop it, and this is all part of the strategy of the game. If you're being chased and they're about to steal your item, you can drop it and lead them away, which, again, is fun and I like it. I was really surprised what a smart game E.T. Phone Home really is for the time. Once you've collected all the items to make the phone and delivered them to the green square in front of Elliot's house, you hear E.T. phone home, and you get to take control of him and take him to the forest to meet up with his ride. This is usually a piece of cake in the easier difficulty levels, and the enemies only serve to drain the rest of his energy faster. But on higher difficulty levels, this becomes a mad dash to avoid enemies and get to the rendezvous point before you lose your last bit of energy. Again, the gameplay is deceptively deep, and overall, I really enjoyed this movie tie-in game. It's incredible what a difference this version is compared to the notorious 2600 version, and it's a shame that this game doesn't get more attention for being the superior game. Graphically, E.T. Phone Home features very small sprites that lack a whole lot of details. Well, outside of Elliot. The first time I took control of E.T. himself, I wasn't aware of what was going on, and couldn't tell his sprite apart from the rest of the environment he was standing in. The Elliot sprite has a bit more detail, as I said before, but he's the exception in this game. The normal is just low-detailed character sprites and environments. I do appreciate that everything needs to be small, as it helps you to find phone pieces and see more of the environment. But honestly, this game is just, well, kind of ugly, and it's hard to decipher what everything is at times. It all looks the same in the city and forest, etc., and it's just not all that fun to look at. Overall, the game isn't a looker, but it all works once you understand and know what's going on. And the sound, much like the graphics, leaves a lot to be desired. It starts out fine with a decent rendition of the iconic E.T. theme, and I didn't mind that song at all. It's always been a classic, and fans will be sure to enjoy this rendition. At least, I enjoyed it. But once you start the game, you basically listen to beeping, and it can range from loud and annoying to quiet and still pretty annoying. Now this beeping is all in an attempt to let you know if you're near a phone piece or not, but it barely works in that regard. Many times I hear the tone and can't figure out at all which direction I'm supposed to go in, so I end up wandering all around the area aimlessly, stopping and going, hoping to see an item appear. And God, listening to that god-awful beeping made me want to mute the television shortly into my first time playing. When you rescue E.T., you get a weak voice sample of him saying, "Phone home, phone home." And this would have been a fun novelty in 1983, but in 2025, it's just laughably bad. The sound is bad. The graphics are bad. But the gameplay is deceptively deep and actually quite challenging and fun. And I was surprised how well it all held my attention, given the age of the cartridge. It works without issue on my Atari XEGS, and also via the A8 Pico cart for those who want to download it and play it that way. But, with all that said, I think it's time to hop into my mom's spaceship and fly into my home planet known as the pros and cons section, and see if this game can phone home a good score. E.T. Phone Home is a much better game than its 2600 cousin, and it's surprisingly deep and challenging. And it's fun, too. The 9 levels of difficulty allow most people to learn the game without much trouble, and slowly work up to an appropriate difficulty level for them. They use the one-button joystick very well, and once you've given the game time and learned the controls, you'll find yourself running Elliot around like a pro. I also think the rendition of John Williams' Flying, aka the E.T. theme in this game, is stellar, and I loved hearing it. But we need to get to the cons, and let's start with the graphics. Everything is small and, well, ugly. But the graphics work, I guess. They're utilitarian. And same with the audio. Outside of the before-mentioned theme, the rest of the audio is a dud, and annoying to listen to. The game can also be confusing to approach and decipher without a manual, but hey, we're living in the internet age. Download the manual and get yourself in the game. So with all that said, I'm going to give E.T. Phone Home for the Atari 8-bit line of computers 3 cream-colored one-button joysticks out of 5. This is definitely the superior Atari E.T. game, and it shows that this one had much more time to cook than its cousin. Unfortunately, that's also why this one is lesser known, and will probably always be living in the shadow of that other game. Which is a shame, in my honest opinion. But you've all heard what I think about the Atari 8-bit version of E.T. Now I want to hear from all of you. Did you own this version growing up? Or have you ever played it before? If so, do you agree with my assessment, or do you disagree? And do you prefer this or the 2600 version of the classic movie tie-in E.T. game? Let me know about all this and more in the comments down below. And please, leave a like if you enjoyed the review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And hit the bell icon to be notified whenever we upload. Also, I have social media, a Discord server where I do giveaways and where we all chat it up and talk Atari, and of course I have a Patreon. This channel is ran and supported thanks to my Patreons, and I can't thank them enough for all their support. You guys rock, and I couldn't do this without you. And with all that, let's wrap up this review of E.T. Phone Home on the Atari 8-bit computers. I've been the 7800 Pro Gamer, a Reese's Pieces addicted alien who hides in children's closets to avoid arrest, here on the planet known as the Atari Network. And I'd like to thank you all for not turning me in, or watching. And remember to stay classy, Atarians.